Welcome to another episode of The Next Fix. And today we've got this beautiful young lady here, Leslie Draffin. She's no stranger to the camera. She's clearly photogenic, and she's got experience on news channels, things of that nature. So we're dealing with a real professional here. And the typical nature is a little bit, we dive into the scumbag nature. Can't help it sometimes. But we are going to talk about psilocybin and the healing properties there. I'm super excited as usual. I don't know too much, so everything's kind of hitting my ears at the same time that it's hitting yours. And she's coming through to us from Texas. Leslie, how you doing?
Doing great, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, yeah. So now I want to know, there's a highlight like in your biography there, a short little excerpt of your life, but the words that you use psilocybin or mushrooms, for people that don't know, well, typically mushrooms. I think you can get it other ways, but you used it to get sober, and so like that sentence is like super peculiar to me. And so I want to know more about that, or what maybe your addicted nature looked like when things were pretty rough for you.
Yeah. So like you said, I have passed as a TV news anchor. I was in journalism for 15 years. And for most of that time, I was really relying heavily on alcohol and at times Adderall. And an eating disorder to really just disconnect me from my body, because I felt so unsafe there. I had been raised really religious. My dad was a preacher. And then at 18, I had my first sexual experience and was diagnosed with herpes about a month later. And so that really threw me at 18 years old, freshman in college, into this space of disconnection from my body and really living in a shame spiral. And so alcohol became what I used to, one, like lubricate things socially, because now I know I had a bit of social anxiety, but also to make me just numb out from how sad and ashamed I felt. And so my 20s were really my drunk years. And what's, interesting is, even though I was drinking every single day and, a lot, it never really materialized into anything that was what society would say I'm like alcoholism. Now looking back, I'm like, it was like, girls' night, drinking a couple glasses of wine. But I distinctly remember in my mid-20s when I had to go from buying a bottle of wine a day because I was drinking through it to getting the 1.5 liter. And then eventually we'd go to like the box wine, right? Because there was just more. And I wasn't drinking a box of wine a day, but like it was really getting pretty heavy.
Right. So like on that spectrum, because it's unique to every person.
Right.
Functionality, right? So there's like this functionality to like volume of use. Yeah. And what I think is, like you mentioned, the lubrication, the social lubrication is deemed rather normal, right? People go, they have a couple drinks, they have a couple laughs, they can go home. It all seems that's all like very normal. Other people may disagree. Yeah. So the spectrum to where you land is rather unique. It's unique for all of us, but yours specifically is like, it's got a pretty good marker. And that marker was like, okay, the volume went from a 750 milliliters to now a jug, a jug of wine. Yeah. And that's what, did you notice it right away? Like, because I feel like there might have been a little bit of a delay, right? Like you buy it because you're like, oh, that wasn't enough. Or did you know instantaneously, like, oh shit, I'm going down like a
definitely not
darker road?
No. So in my 20s, right. I was so just in darkness, like in disconnection. I really saw it as, and I'd be drinking with a friend, and maybe that was where I was like, excuse was, oh, well, it's not, one bottle is certainly not enough for me and my friend to drink. So let's get the 1.5. I was also really broke. So like the 1.5 was cheaper. Let's be honest.
Right.
And so I don't think I noticed up until prepping for our interview right now that I consciously remember like the day that I was like, oh, I needed to get them like go higher. Because I remembered when it was just smarter to buy a box of wine because it lasted longer and it was cheaper. But that day, like when I went with my friend Lacey and got like a 1.5 liter versus the 750 milliliter, that was like, oh. And I was living in Louisiana where like it's a drinking culture for sure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't think it was clear at all. And I would not have deemed what I was doing at all like quote unquote dangerous, but I sure felt like I needed to lie about how many drinks I had to my doctor. So like if you need to lie to your doctor, like I feel like that's like a sign.
Yeah. There's and again, it's because the you listed quite a few like real. Those are real logical answers. It's like, oh, this is a lower dollar value for my purchase. Of course, I need more in bulk.
Yeah.
And then but it's like again, it's like when you add all those variables together, you can start to see, like, well, now hindsight, right? Like you can look back and say, oh yeah, that was maybe not total bullshit because you're right, it's cheaper, but like those are what you're using to make it okay, right? You're making it okay to increase this volume of booze around the house. But okay, so let's carry on. So your mid-20s. You're getting into Adderall, which if anybody doesn't know that's just pharmaceutical methamphetamines. It will make you a machine. So it will get you through a day. And so I'm familiar. And so here you are in your mid-20s. You're knocking those back, but your professional career isn't necessarily suffering on the surface level, right?
No.
And like you had said, people would look at you objectively and say, she's fine, right? Oh, she's doing great. So, but nonetheless, things are getting darker. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. In my mid-20s, I moved to being a morning news anchor. And I had this schedule where I would wake up at like 2 or 2:30 in the morning, go to work, anchor the news, and then be home by 11 a.m. or noon. And so my friends who were also on that shift, every normal quote unquote working person is working until 5, but we were off work. So we were partying. We were drinking, like afternoon drinking team is what we would call it. We would meet at someone's house and we would drink, and we would, get to that place where I say browning out is kind of what I would call it. Like you can still function, people, like you're not passed out. You kind of remember, but it's really hazy. And then we'd go to bed at 7 p.m., wake up and do it again. And no, my job, I was like doing pretty well in my job. I had some other things happen where I got divorced, which again threw me even deeper into the drinking culture because then I was dating. But yeah, my late 20s with that shift in the schedule, like that really just made it worse. And now looking back, I'm like, there had to be so many times I went to work, like drove to work after 5 hours of sleep where I was still pretty drunk. But I wasn't feeling, because I was like not feeling that hungover. I was still in the throes of a really serious eating disorder at that point, and I barely ate, so I just drank all my calories. So I'm like, I had to think, looking back, like there were definitely times you would have popped on a breathalyzer if you'd ever gotten pulled over. But I never got in trouble with the law. My job, I made some like kind of risky decisions for sure in my personal life, but with my job, I was able to get there and maintain this sense of put togetherness while, like you said, and I was just sharing earlier, internally, all hell was breaking loose. It was all falling apart.
Right. And so, so this is carrying into your 30s, right? And so now, when people ask me this question, oh, well, when did it, what was what was your rock bottom moment? I don't have a singular, but I can see this. I can see that from your explanation, it's a snowball, and it's gaining momentum and size, and it's coming downhill pretty fast, right? Yeah. So at what point did the train come off the tracks? Like what was if there is one moment, then do you have that? Like what happened?
I don't really have a moment where it was like, oh shit, I have to get sober now. I certainly had some really risky dating decisions in my late 20s that, looking back, like I can't believe I didn't like get assaulted in some of the situations that I put myself in. But I never, I never did. What really led to me finally getting sober was having my spiritual awakening. So in 2019, I really began being really interested in meditation and doing things like journaling for self-reflection. And I was in therapy at that time, on and off for a while, for other things, never for how much I was drinking. It was for, my body image, or if it was for my divorce, But when I started to have this spiritual awakening in 2019, I think I just started to look at myself and notice what was happening. But at first it had nothing to do with alcohol. I was still drinking really heavily, but I really think that was probably
Right.
the first catalyst as to something is shifting in me internally. But it wasn't until about 18 months after that that I even explored conscious sobriety.
Conscious sobriety. And now the eating disorder, is it running parallel here? Or because I feel like maybe you're starting to know you need to take a stand against this thing. Am I right?
Yeah.
Like if you're searching for spiritual awakening, you know what you're doing, or at least in your mind, somewhere in there, it realizes like this shit is not all right. You
Right.
can't. Was it bulimia or was it anorexia?
So it was
seems
both.
like anorexia.
Yeah, it was
Oh, God.
anorexia and a little bit of bulimia. If I ate too much food, of course I was going to purge. But what happened, I was thinking back, the first time I ever went any extended amount of time being sober after turning 21 was when I did Whole30 in late 2018. If you're familiar with Whole30, I don't really know how popular it is now, but it was like an
Yeah.
elimination diet. They don't call it a diet, but it's definitely a diet, knowing what I know about diet culture. But it's this elimination challenge that for 30 days you give up things like, alcohol, duh, of course, like refined
Right.
sugars, and then usually like gluten and dairy. And I had done it for a story for the news. I had this weekly special I did called Your Best Life, and I did Whole30 for 30 days. And that was the first time I was sober for longer than like a week. If I had to be on like antibiotics or something, I would have, stopped drinking in my 20s. But that 30-day period was the first time I didn't drink alcohol. And that was in 2018.
Right.
And so the eating disorder, though, started to manifest. Like I was eating and I was not throwing up that much, but then it started to shift into orthorexia, which is this idea that you're like really into clean eating, and sometimes even having this mindset where I eat this much and I work out this much so that it cancels out.
Right.
And that's really
right.
tricky because in my mind's eye, that was like being healthy.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and the terminology you have is so it's the nomenclature you're choosing, or at least that you're aware of, is like spot on. It's like you've really broken this stuff down. Because I was a personal trainer, and I would say stuff like you can't outwork a bad diet, stuff like that. It's like binding the activity to the caloric intake or whatever that people are eating. But like there's always this like balance and tricks that people do in their minds. With substance abuse and all of that,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, well, I got up and I went for a run, so I can have 10 beers. It's like people will do this math all the time, right? And so here you are, you went into this, and I don't even remember the term you used for like healthy. What did you say? It was like
Orthorexia.
Eating really orthorexia. Okay, yeah. There's so many variations here, but so now. This is 2018. You dabble into like a cleanse, a diet. There's a million terms and a million different ways to spin it. But it helped with your eating disorder, and you saw like a little glimmer of what it was like to not be. Because this is how many years you've been doing this now, right? Like all of your 20s, you've been
right. I was.
and
yeah, I mean, my eating disorder started when I was 15, and I was in it for 20 years, on and off. It was really at its peak in its 20s, and Adderall helped me because Adderall made me not hungry. And
right.
Yeah. But the Whole30, I think it was the first time. I don't think it helped with my eating disorder at all. I think it was more of my willpower to be like, oh, I could be sober for 30 days. Like we could do this. But I read a book in early 19 by a woman named Ruby Warrington, and it was like a spiritual book. And it's like a silly title, like Material World, Mystical Girl, Material World. The point is not what that book was about, but an introduction to this author, because I really liked her work. And then I believe it was later that year, she came out with a book called Sober Curious. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm never going to be like, why would I want to be sober? I was so averse to this book, even though I really liked the author. I even ended up interviewing her for my job. She's from London. And yet this book was like, no, I don't want to touch that. So all of 2019, even though I had spent 30 days in September of 18 sober, I was still drinking. I was hanging out with friends, drinking with my husband. The eating disorder was very much in like that clean eating phase where, like you said, I would macro track my alcohol. So I made sure at the end of the day, I left enough fat and carb macros so that I could fit in wine. And I used to be able to tell you exactly how many it was, but now I can't remember. But like, for sure, I was scheduling in the drinks daily still in 2019, even though, you know, I was working out 5 days a week, lifting super heavy. And it wasn't until 2020, I think, when finally I became so aware of how much I was drinking and how much it was negatively impacting my mental health. And that's really when I started to shift into conscious sobriety.
Wow. And I didn't, now that you're like unveiling, it's the drinking was a big thing. But I know I'm super excited to jump over, switch lanes into the psilocybin and how like how that happened, right? So you're, and what I love too is that you're like flirting with the idea of spirituality and like, you kind of know, but you haven't made any hard decisions. But then you said 2020, you got rid of booze.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so where does the psilocybin start to be applied, or had you always done it, and again, everybody, that's mushrooms, microdosing mushrooms.
Yeah. Psilocybin mushrooms is what I was exploring. Psilocybin. Yeah.
Oh, I'm adding too many syllables. I said psychosylbin.
Yeah.
It's psilocybin.
Psilocybin.
Say it again.
Psilocybin.
God.
Yeah.
I screwed it up. It's
okay. Psychedelics is another way, because there's more than just psilocybin that some folks use for this. But yeah, so in 2020, I got married at the height of the pandemic. We had to cancel our wedding. We had just got married under a tree with an officiant. And I was drunk that whole weekend. And afterwards I went back to work and I was like, damn, that was all fuzzy. Like I wasn't even able to really be excited. And granted, if you can't remember the depression that like a lot of us were in, this was 3 weeks into lockdown when I was getting married. You know, I was the essential news anchor at my job. You saw all those folks who anchored the news from their homes. That was never me, because I was too dependable. I was too good. I had to be there. So I was doing all of these extra things and my anxiety was through the roof. And so the week after my wedding, I really took a hard look at okay, let me read this book. Let me finally get this Sober Curious book. And really off the bat, it's helping with sleep and anxiety. That's what she talks about as far as when we leave alcohol behind, those two things can become resolved. And that's what I was suffering from so deeply. I was so anxious and I would wake up every single night with an hour of insomnia. And so in 2020, in April of 2020, I had my first arrangement, my first situationship with Sober Curiosity. And I was sober for about, I would say 2.5 months, kind of through the summer. And then I went back to drinking, because it was never this thing where I'm committing to being sober forever. When I would start these Sober Curious, because that's the thing, being curious about what my body feels like being sober. I always had this deadline at the end of this period where I'm okay, and this is when I'll have my first drink. So I went back to drinking at the end of 2020. January of 21 rolls around. And again, Ruby's doing this 100 days of sober challenge. I'm oh shit, yeah, I can do that. So I was sober for over 100 days. But again, 2021, my birthday rolls around and I'm ooh, let's drink. So I did. And I went back to drinking. But what that extended period did do for me, again, curiosity, it helped me start to notice, why am I drinking? What am I trying to avoid? And so even when I was portioning out my alcohol for my macro tracking, I was okay, and we're trying to numb out from this horrible shit you saw on television and the fact that you don't feel safe in your body. And so I at least became more aware. But microdosing came into my life, and that's the act of taking a very tiny amount of a psychedelic substance so that you're not high, you're not tripping, but yet you can still get the benefits of neuroplasticity and brain rewiring. I found that in March of 2022. And getting sober was not on my radar. I had been sober for a couple of weeks at the beginning of that year, and then went to this festival with our food truck. My husband and I own a food truck, and got drunk. And so it's whatever. That was the shortest amount of time. But I found microdosing in March. Sobriety was never the thing I wanted to first work on, but it's ultimately what came, and I think is probably the longest and most far-reaching benefit of my microdosing. But I didn't really get sober, and now, like in June of 24 is what we're talking. I didn't have my last drink until December of 2022. It was December 26th. So I had been microdosing on and off that year. And at the end of 2022, that was when I decided to leave my TV job.
Sorry to stop you, but so when you said you had been microdosing, how did you go about it? Was it like a meditation session? Did you were you just doing it intermittently, like at the end of the night? I mean, how did it look like? What did the process look like?
So I worked with a coach for about 3 months, where I was able to learn all about microdosing, the reasons why psilocybin works in the brain, or the how it works. And I met with her 7 times. And again, we did do meditations. But the focus for me on that protocol, which is what we call a long-term commitment to microdosing, it's a protocol, was actually healing sexual trauma, sexual shame. Again, from that herpes diagnosis at 18, that was really at my forefront of my mind. Like, this is what's most deeply impacting me. The alcohol, I didn't even think that was something that was a big problem. I was fine with my sober bouts, my month to 3 to 4 months. And at times I would, catch myself drinking 4 or 5 days a week, but it was so drastically smaller in quantity than it had been in the years before. And so I was like, okay, I think I've got this under control. And microdosing, and I should also say, at this point, I never thought I would get trained to be a psychedelic guide. I was just doing it for my own healing. But microdosing is something that you do a few times a week for 8 or 12 weeks, and then you take a break. Some folks never come back to it. Sometimes the things that you uncover during that 8 to 12 week period are enough to sort of course correct. And maybe you don't go back. Maybe you come back to it in a year or so if you have something else that you find as a challenge in your life that you want to overcome. But for me, those months working with my coach really helped lay a very solid foundation for, again, the piecing together of what was happening, my root wounds. And it was very focused for me around pleasure and around receiving. And so in 2022, it was my second probably dark night of the soul. I ended up leaving my job in the middle of the year. My mental health was in total shambles. I was diagnosed with PTSD and burnout, in addition to anxiety and depression. 2 of my dogs died really suddenly. And then later in that year, in December, a friend of mine that I had been friends with for a decade sort of ended our friendship. And that was finally the catalyst where I was like, damn, I was drinking every day in December because of that pain. And so that's finally when I was like, you know what, like, let's do an intentional microdosing protocol with the intention of helping me slow down and be present. Again, never saying being sober, but I had uncovered subconsciously this root wound of not feeling safe in the present moment, which is why I often turned to these more addictive behaviors like alcohol or eating. And so I stopped drinking, microdosed with myself at that point. I was in the midst of being trained for 10 or 12 weeks at the beginning of 2023. And I feel like that is when the reset in my brain happened. And I haven't gotten drunk since. I have tasted alcohol since, I should point that out. And we can talk about why I did that. But since December 26th of 2022, I've been sober.
Man, you're incredibly, you're methodical. That's what I'm pulling away, is that, and I love that. I love that. You've done clearly a lot of work and a lot of observation, and you've increased your awareness. It's very high and you can articulate it. So it's like, what a gift all of that is, a special combination. And I think it's amazing. And so now you've got, like, at that time you had been through, is that 2 protocols, or you had gone through? I had gone through 2 protocols.
Yeah, two very dedicated protocols and some microdosing in between. But right. Yeah, a dedicated protocol in early 2022 that lasted 3 or 4 months. I took a break when I was really heavily grieving my dogs and the loss of my career, because when we are in these acute stages of grief, sadness, trauma, we don't want to explore psychedelics because it can make things worse. So I had taken a break I had felt this call to get trained and started to take courses and work with teachers and mentors. And then in January of 2023, I committed again to that 8 to 12 week, very dedicated protocol with the intention of taking my precious time. That was my intention. I take my precious time.
That's in man. So I want to share a little bit, and it's something that I had shared with you before we started recording. Now, what you're doing is it's very organized. It's very because it has to have you have to give it respect. The
Yes.
psychedelics, like, and so I had shared that my sister, she's much younger than myself. And her stepfather, or my stepfather, her father, he hung himself. He was an addict, and then she was abducted in college. And the guy said he was going to rape and kill her. She jumped out of a moving car. All very traumatic, like super high traumatic things. And then she gets help, and she speaks to somebody every week, and she's very responsible in that way. But she was using full blown LSD, like full blown acid. And I've taken acid, and it's intense. Like, it will bring you to the brink of your abilities and thoughts and nightmares and whatever. And so I don't really mess, like, that's a whole other thing. Right. But she was just bragging to me. Because I'm going to share with her your journey, because I feel like she's would be all about it. Because of the value that she saw with, like, full blown illegal drugs. Like, she's just buying, street drugs, and she was gaining benefits from it. Yes. She was using the psychedelics to really figure some things out. So I respect that of her, even though it seems like I can't grasp it personally, but it had worked for her. Mm-hmm. And so, but it's not something you can really do for longevity, like taking full blown acid. Not something I recommend doing a lot, because it could kind of melt your brain from what I've seen. But what you're talking about is completely different. It is a completely different journey. It's very small doses. It is calculated. It is measured. It is observed. And from what I know in my experience is that it can be very healthy. And that's what you're telling us. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I should say in 2022, I also sat with full doses of mushrooms several times. But the majority of what I was exploring for my own healing were, like you said, those very small controlled doses of mushrooms, and pairing those with things like journaling, meditation, grounding practices, things that help me find balance, not only mentally, because that was one of the things that I felt really challenged by, was my mental health, but physically as well. And LSD has its own background in this work as well. I think it's so interesting that she explored it. The guy who started the 12-step Alcohol Anonymous program explored LSD to get sober. So it's got a root in the sober community, right? At its very foundation. Right. Because I think of kind of what your sister was exploring, this ability to help us move through trauma. But when you look at the neuroplasticity with mushrooms specifically, and we can get into like why I think mushrooms worked for me and helped me get sober. It's rewiring your brain in a way that I really feel like helps you make new habits. And for me, the new habit was not drinking.
Right. In addition to other things, though, not just not drink. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, because I, in my mind, I start to go down memory lane a little bit, and I can, when you're talking about journaling and things of that nature, like, that stuff cannot be done if you're tripping balls. Right. You could be, it's not what, like, I think, and that was my experience, because I wasn't taking it for medicinal use. I was taking it because I was a maniac and an addict, right? So, like with most things, you can go overboard, and now you've lost the value. So again, I respect it, and that's, I think, if you go in with that approach, then you get real benefits, you get real value from it. And so, all right, so you used it to leverage your sobriety, and now so that was 2023, correct?
Yeah.
Is that right? And so, and congratulations, by the way. That's fantastic. And now you've kind of given us a little hint a little while ago in the conversation. You kind of gave us a little hint that now that's what you're doing. Am I right? Yeah. You're coaching, you're guiding. Guiding is the word you used.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I do now is I work specifically with women and I help them heal trauma holistically through somatic resourcing, which is a kind of therapeutic coaching and the intentional use of psychedelics for self healing. I mainly help people through microdosing psilocybin, but I've also consulted folks on things like ayahuasca. And I myself this summer am exploring LSD microdosing. And I have a really good friend who's a
Mm.
naturopathic doctor who used LSD to heal her addictions. And so we talk a lot about LSD and microdosing it. And I'm excited. I've only done a couple of microdoses at this point, so I can't report back anything at this moment. But that's
Sure.
sort of where I am now, is helping people. You know, I spent a year getting trained through various different organizations around trauma and around medicine facilitation. And that is where I am now in my coaching career.
I got a quick question. What I haven't done ayahuasca, and but it's and I feel like originally it was it's a real thing, and it's a South American cultural shaman like
Yes.
experience, and it kind of like took off a little bit, and it got a little too cool, right? So people are just like, oh,
Yeah.
like I got people that I know that try to make it and all this stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I heard there's like fake shamans. What's your thoughts on ayahuasca, or have you done it, or what's your?
Yeah, I have not done it, but I think what you're expressing is absolutely true. I think that when we had major celebrities talking about going down to South America and sitting with ayahuasca, it became really popular. And a shadow side of the industry that I work in are people like fake shamans, people that are not trauma
Mm.
trained, people who are in their ego to make money in this industry and not be the helper. So it is really tricky. And ayahuasca also is kind of growing in certain places in the US. I know there's an ayahuasca church in Florida because there was like a big
Oh
documentary
wow.
about them. I think there's one in Tennessee as well, and other parts of the country too. But some folks are actually getting, I don't even know if you would call it a permit, they're getting permission because they're basing it on this like church. They're organizing as a church in order to be able to serve this sacrament. And so when I say I help people with ayahuasca, people go to these huge trips, spend thousands of dollars to drink ayahuasca, and then come back with no integration support, and all hell breaks loose in their life, and then they call me because a lot of those
Yeah.
big, yeah, that's and so that's another element of the work that I do is help people integrate big, huge doses, multi-day ceremonies that are happening at these retreat centers in South America and Central America, and they'll be left with very little support afterwards. And so that's where I come in.
Right. And I think it's advantageous to have going back though, because I think it's a glorious term and it makes sense to me. The protocol, like because it adds observation. It adds like you're doing it controlled, and then I imagine you may be adjusting things as you move along, it's just a more. I think it's a smarter way to go about it because. I mean, I've walked away from some experiences and I thought like I had some kind of an epiphany,
Yeah.
but damn, what the I didn't get to use any of it. I mean, there were experiences and I value them, but it's like, man, to put pen to paper and really implement change in my life as a result, no, not
Yeah.
happening. And I think that that's what it is. It's like you go on this, and it's appealing. It's an adventure and all of that. I understand, but if you want help, you got to go your way. Is
Yeah.
what I think. I think that's the best. It's how you get the most bang for your buck. Is you get real help. It's somebody that's like really with you for a longer period than a weekend and taking a few G's from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, when we look at the stats, it's less than 10% of people who can go on one of these trips, right? And I'm talking the metaphysical trip, right? Like not actually the trip to the place, but who
Got it.
sit
Got
with
it.
these
Thank you for
psychedelic
that.
experiences, right? You go on this trip to expanded consciousness, and about 10% of people can come back and implement change on their own and make really big shifts in their life. 90% of people cannot. And so some of those folks will, kind of like what you said, they may have a few weeks afterwards that they have implemented these changes on their own, but then the old habits creep back in. And then there's some folks who might have spiritual emergencies occur after these trips, these expanded consciousness. But I think you're right. Like, I really think the biggest flaw in the system of psychedelics right now is the lack of integration that happens afterwards. Because if folks were spending more time integrating through either a protocol like microdosing or even a protocol after a full trip, we would have that number, 10%, a lot higher, and people would feel a lot more healed versus starting to look at this, like some folks are, as just a magic pill. This is not a magic pill to get you sober. It's not a magic pill to heal your trauma. You are the magic within yourself, but this is a really beautiful catalyst to help you start looking at what the fuck's going on within you. Because sometimes we cannot see that in self-talk therapy. Like, I was so good at talking about my trauma that my therapist would be like, wow, it's like I'm talking to a colleague. Well, why do I feel like shit still? And I'm still drinking and I'm still doing all these things. Like, I know I'm very good at communicating. I made a career of it for 15 years and in the end was making 6 figures. Like, yeah, no shit. I know I'm good at this, but nothing was really happening to help me until I started to pair psychedelics with that somatic based practices, which really helps to get you into your body. That was when I finally started to see the shifts.
Right. Yeah. You're kind of, man, that hit me right square in the chest. Is like, I've spoken to a lot of like therapists and they're looking at me like, oh, well, you've already figured it out. And I'm like, okay, so what the hell are we doing here? I'm like, oh, or the other side is when I needed to manipulate that person or whoever it might be to them thinking of me either healthier than I was or to dodge the whole conversation. I could do that too. It's like, yeah, you're kind of a victim of your own gifts in a way, right? So, but man, that is all just like, I mean, I truly, personally, I believe in the value of that, and now you got my wheels turning because I'm like, man, I don't know if I could get away with it. When my sister told me she was taking acid, like, I was like, what, how, like, I mean, I was so intense. Acid was so intense. Like, I felt like I was plugged in for like 10 hours.
Yeah.
And that was the experience with the illegal version. And man, I think I'm so old now. I'm like, man, I feel like I'd have a heart attack or something. I don't know. But so like, but super, super small elements of the same kind of experience is so intriguing. I'm thoroughly intrigued. And so, well, that being said, all right, I want to know, well, I think everybody wants to know, like, well, how do we get in contact to you? What does it look like to work with a person like yourself? Yeah. What are some resources? What is it? Is it, can you get it through insurance? Or, I have all these questions, so
Right.
maybe you can just shed some light.
So unfortunately, microdosing psilocybin is still illegal in most of the states. LSD is illegal. Microdosing psilocybin
right.
and psilocybin in general in a couple of places is either decriminalized or legal. So you need to be aware of where you live and your local regional laws and know your risk. And what I do is not covered by insurance. I don't know if even in the places it's legal, they've gotten insurance to cover it quite yet. But working with someone like myself looks like, one, I like to work with folks who have already come and done a bit of their own research, right? So there are amazing documentaries out there. The one about Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, I think might still be on Netflix. It's a great gateway into this work. So is the documentary Fantastic Fungi. It talks a lot about how psilocybin works in the body. And so starting your
Side note,
research.
I watched that movie and I cried.
Yeah.
Fantastic Fungi. It's so good. Everybody, like, please, like, whether you're into the experience or not, like, it's so good. It's like oh my gosh. I was like pumped to watch that. It was really good stuff. It's a great gateway. It's a great gateway because it shows you realistic, both spiritually and science-based stuff about it. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
I think thank you for that enthusiasm. I mean, it's like exactly what you said. It gives such a great scientific backing and still leaves room for the mystical. And I think that that's important too, because I like to work with folks who also are open to the mystical side of this. I can tell you about the science and why it works in our bodies, but there is an element of the unknown with this. And That's, I think, where healing is. We don't know where we're going to go on these trips. Mushrooms give you what you need, not necessarily what you want. You may have no idea what you need. And I was never asking them to help me be sober. But look what happened. So doing your own research, I have a free microdosing guide that I can give you to put in the links in the show notes. You can share with your Facebook group that explains what it is, how to get started, how to safely source, and really how to start looking internally at yourself to see maybe some of the big obstacles that you want to invite this medicine into your life to help you heal. And then if you're listening to this conversation and you have more questions, or if you just know, hell yes, like I want to go this route, you can book a free one-on-one discovery chat with me where we'll first uncover if you're a good candidate. Because I want to be honest, this is a really safe medicine and there are people that it is not intended for. So those are usually folks who are on certain medications, people who have a history of heart issues, and folks who may have a direct history of something like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Although I will say new research is coming out to say it might not be as much of a contraindication for those challenges as we first thought. But we'll figure that out together, right? I'll ask you a series of questions. We'll chat about what's going on in your life and your family history. And then we'll look at how this really could help you specifically quickly in your life based on what you feel like is blocking you. Most people come to me because of sexual trauma, obviously because of my own history of sexual trauma. People come to me because they feel like they don't know what their purpose is in life. I work with a lot of women in midlife who are like shifting into like a new phase. Maybe the kids have left, maybe they're leaving their job. And then again, I'm really excited in the next few months to really start looking more into helping folks who have that desire to get sober. Because I really think it's an untapped area, right? Mental health is so interesting and so complex, and right now only really manage it with medicine and talk therapy. And I think mental health and alcoholism specifically and addiction in general are so closely linked. And so that's what I'm really excited over the next 6 or 7 months to start looking at building a protocol and a curriculum. And again, working one-on-one with folks who do have that desire.
And I think that you are uniquely capable of helping people that are in the predicament that you were once in. Right. So you have a special power to help people with the tools you use to get sober. So, I mean, you have a very powerful and unique ability to help people do just that. Right. So that I think there's, again, a ton of value in that. I've got a quick side question here, because when you said sourcing, now, I know people in Colorado, they just they basically grow their own mushrooms. Yep. And I know here in Florida, on the flip side of that thing, if you go picking them, you can get in serious legal trouble. So like, of course I don't recommend that. But so is it, what have you seen that seems to be the path of least resistance for sourcing?
So I say safe sourcing because one, in my guide, it talks about places that are legitimate businesses that are running out of places where it's legal to get. That's kind of what I'll say about that. But I think you're completely right. Do not go pick mushrooms and eat them unless you can, with 100% certainty, know what they are. I don't even go foraging for these things. I am not a mycologist. I'm not a mushroom expert, right? And so that's one thing. The other thing I'll say about this is every single time I post on the Instagram or on TikTok or on Facebook, comments in the comment section will be like, buy mushrooms from like, it's always like Psiloguy 25 or like some batshit crazy like handle. Do not buy any drugs from those people. If it's a comment on my page, do not buy stuff from them. You'll lose your money. It's a scam at best. And also it's like, there are reputable places to find these sources. Look, if you're out there and you're like, how do I even start? One, search to see if your area has a psychedelic community. I started one called the Central Texas Psychedelic Society. There's a Texas, they're in every state. Usually there's a psychedelic society. Start to rub elbows with those folks. Do not go in there and ask where to get medicine. Don't say, where do I get drugs? They will kick you right out. Be smart. But that's a great place.
It's
to
like
start.
saying bong in the smoke shop, right? I did that when I was, I did that. It's like, hey, I need a bong. And they're like, get out. I was like, oh man,
Well,
I didn't know.
Hey, but here's something else that's really interesting about smoke shops right now. So when I talk about microdosing psilocybin, the mushrooms that people usually work with are called psilocybe cubensis. That's like the strain of mushrooms. There's 180 plus different types of those. But there's a separate type of psychedelic mushroom called Amanita muscaria, which I guess is not, and I haven't looked into a ton of research on it, but that is not a schedule. It's not a controlled substance in the States. So if you walk into a smoke shop right now, you can find magic mushroom chocolate bars. Just know that what you're getting in those chocolate bars is not the same thing we're talking about here. It might make you have a similar experience to microdosing, but that is a separate mushroom. But like, honestly, smoke shops, if you ask them about magic mushroom bars and they have them, and the person seems really knowledgeable, that could be a place to have a conversation about this. But again, we're not just shouting, where do I buy mushrooms? Where do I buy magic mushrooms?
Right. And so what I really appreciate is that what you've just said, and just so everybody can like distill something, she's talking about conversations with people that may know.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you want to get into these communities, you've got to come legit. You've got to come inquisitive, like legitimately inquire and want to know. Yeah. Because these types of communities, I don't belong to any of them formally, but I know they can smell a kook from a mile away. And so, but if you're on a pursuit to get better, well, first of all, reach out to Leslie. I mean, that's step one. Reach out to her. But like, don't go marching around like a fool because, this is, and again, you've got to do your due diligence here. And so, but more importantly, it's conversations. You start the conversation, you take away from it some knowledge, and then make a really informed decision once you've gained enough knowledge. But I think the best place to go for this knowledge is right in front of us here. She's the best resource from what I can tell. She knows more than pretty much anybody I've ever known or bought anything from. So, and so, anyways, I'm so grateful, Leslie, that you came onto the show and that you've shared your story and you've shared your knowledge with us. And I really thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah. And I do want to just add one other thing too, before we go, because you said it so beautifully, those conversations, when we look at the way mushrooms grow and the connectivity that they create under the soil. And if you don't know much about the mycelium network, watch Fantastic Fungi, you will get it. But I really see these as helping us connect with ourselves in deeper ways. The truest path of intimacy is knowing yourself more deeply in ways like psilocybin will help foster. And it also helps us foster connection, like you were saying, with communicating with other people. And I think so many of us who are in an addiction are very in ourselves. We are very self-contained. We're probably suffering. We might be suffering in silence. We might be suffering solo. But like when we can find community to reach out to talk about this with, to reach out to talk about anything with, I think that's a beautiful step in healing, whether or not it's, because we're trying to figure out where to get mushrooms, or we're trying to find out where to just get a friend. And I love that you have this such a big community yourself. I know you're huge into community. And so I think that psilocybin is such a wonderful way to foster connection with ourselves and connection with others in this community mindset type of way.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, this has been a fantastic experience. Again, I thank you so much. I'm super grateful. This has been The Next Fix. We'll see you on the next one, guys.